True story, Mads Mikkelsen once stole my backpack. I probably should come up with a better intro for what I consider to be the greatest Bond movie of all time. Welcome to Popcorn and Vinyl, the show dedicated to films, film score, and vinyl, and today we are talking about Casino Royale, a video that I'm very excited to make because I've been waiting for this record to drop for a very, very long time. It did come out earlier this year, but kind of leading up to the release of No Time to Die, I thought I would talk about some James Bond films. And calling it now, I think the villain for No Time to Die will be Dr. No. That's probably one of those Star Trek Into Darkness, Khan, or Spectre Blofeld situations. This is a franchise that has spawned nearly 60 years. It has created some of the most iconic and greatest spy films of all time. It's made billions of dollars. It's an institution. And the reason it has stood the test of time is it's never been shy about reinventing itself. After Pierce Brosnan finished his tenure of James Bond, it seemed like audiences wanted to go in a new direction, or were at least very excited with the new direction that the Bond producers had in mind, which was a more realistic, down-to-earth approach, less surfing away from a, what was it? Not an asteroid, as ludicrous as an asteroid, melting glacier, to something a little bit more grounded. And this was kind of in the time when, the Bourne films really took off. So it kind of took that early 2000s stylistic approach and married that with a realistic, gritty style that became very popular. The other way that the film has sort of refreshed itself is through a different musical identity. Coming into the composer role, once again, we have David Arnold, who is no stranger to James Bond scores, having scored everything since Tomorrow Never Dies, which previously was my other favorite James Bond soundtrack until Casino Royale. And one thing David Arnold did is, much like the character and the story, really taking James Bond back to the beginning, kind of back to basics. He wasn't the sophisticated secret agent we knew him as previously. He was a rough and tumble, rough around the edges kind of character. And the score reflected that to some degree. And unlike previous Bond scores, he didn't liberally use the James Bond theme. He used it very strategically and very specifically in certain scenes that had a lot of impact. The rest of the score really is just kind of an action, adventure, love story score. And it really serves the film remarkably well. And then we just get those tiny little hints of James Bond as he's coming into the role more and more, and really crescendos at the end with the name is Bond, James Bond riff just taking off from there. It was such an incredible moment in the theater. I remember the first time seeing that scene, having that riff come in. The audience exploded because of how excited everybody was. So I think the way David Arnold handled the character and the growth of him throughout the movie was done remarkably well with the music. As part of this story, they stripped away the gizmos and gadgets. They simplified kind of the story a little bit. And it wasn't this crazy jet-setting kind of story that we've had with hollowed-out volcanoes in the past. This was, a large majority of the story was poker games. And I kind of thought to myself, like, this would sort of get boring after multiple views, but it really doesn't. The way that director Martin Campbell is able to keep that tension, and David Arnold certainly supports that tension with his score, it's just incredible, and it makes it endlessly rewatchable. And there's just so much depth to this character that we've never seen before. We've seen him evolve in this movie alone more than we have in any other James Bond movie, which is kind of cool to see how that character came to be who he was. At the heart of that is his relationship with Vesper. They had such a believable relationship. She was a real three-dimensional character and wasn't just some set decoration or whatever, things that they've done in the past. And I bought her as that character and what drove James Bond and how that impacted him as a character going forward to become the man we know by losing that person that, he fell in love with. As far as villains go, this is an interesting choice. You know, I'm sure they were sitting around in a writer's room and they're like, okay, we need an idea for a Bond villain. You're like, okay, what's a modern villain? And someone's like, I got it. How about a French asthmatic dude who cries blood and has a debt problem? Either that, or we can go with the half man, half dinosaur DNA person. No? All right, well, we'll shelve that for something else. I'm sure we could use it. Like most Bond films, it opens with a very exciting action sequence. Here, they're utilizing parkour.
Parkour!
Which again, at that time, became a big fad throughout the world. And this just kind of gave us a little glimpse of who this James Bond character is right from the start. And already we could see Daniel Craig just punishing his body to deliver us a spectacular performance. You know, I mentioned they stripped away the gizmos and gadgets, but it still kept the soul of what a James Bond movie is. It had the cars, it had the exotic locations, it had everything that we need as James Bond fans, maybe without, cars that spill oil or shoot rockets. But other than that, it kind of had all of that in a realistic sort of setting. And I think that's what made the movie so effective and gave us this new path for Daniel Craig's James Bond. He really made the character his own. You know, it could be tempting to do an interpretation or an impression of another James Bond, but you really can't do that. You can't do a Sean Connery, you can't be Pierce Brosnan, you have to be who you are. And he is now up there with the greats of the James Bond actors. The music really had an incredible emotional journey and just mixes all the different elements of the film so well. It has the high impact action scenes. It has those kind of awe-inspiring moments where you're in these, incredible locations, as well as having just this heart with that love story. And there's so many tender little moments with just a little bit of a little piano riff that give us that emotional impact and make us feel like this is not just a silly James Bond movie. This feels like a real grown-up kind of film at times that's taking itself seriously. So I think that helps to bring in other audiences too, and just makes it a compelling story with great characters and not just being, silly gadgets, which, don't get me wrong, I love the silly gadgets. Some of my favorite movies are in the 70s, Roger Moore silly era. On the action sequence side, between African Rundown and Miami International, that kind of gives you the main part of the action cues. There are so many great scenes where again, we get that little peppering of the James Bond theme as he's slowly becoming the 007 we know. Tracks like Dinner Jackets and the name's Bond, James Bond, some of the highlights of the score. One of my favorite tracks on this entire album is Dirty Martini, where he is poisoned. As for those sweeping, larger-than-life kind of shots, we get tracks like Aston Montenegro, which really just breathes that James Bond life into this film. One thing to note is this album does not contain the Chris Cornell opening title, and I think that will upset some people, but for me that's okay. And it's not because I dislike the song. I actually think it's an awesome opening title song. We get the title theme songs released all the time on various albums, so I would much rather this album focus on as much of the score material as possible rather than taking up room for that title sequence, which can be heard. And frankly, when I'm just listening to the soundtrack, it doesn't need to be on that list for me. I could listen to that in kind of a separate mood than when I'm listening to the score as is. As for the vinyl pressing, I have been waiting for this one for years. I feel like this should have come out a long time ago. We got Skyfall and Spectre, and I thought maybe they're just not releasing David Arnold ones for some reason. But finally, we got Casino Royale. It was released by At the Movies, which I'm surprised I haven't done a video on any of their releases yet, because I would say that they are the best soundtrack label for quality and consistency. I have not had a single pressing of theirs that has been anything but perfect. So At the Movies released this stellar 2 LP edition here. This particular version is on blue vinyl. Has a nice little gun barrel logo on the pink center label. It does feature a double gatefold, which isn't overly spectacular. It has some stills from the movie as well as some credits. And then the front cover, which I really love. And I think this kind of marries a modern style with that old 60s opening credits kind of scene. So I just think this is really well done. And I'm glad that they used this particular piece of artwork. On the back, nothing too crazy, just a nice still from the film along with all the tracks. And then a nice little individually stamped number, which I'm very happy to have, number 1043. I could only imagine who would have any of the double O's. If I'm certain somebody like David Arnold or something would have to have 007. But if you have one of those, my goodness, you must be very, very lucky. The other nice thing about the cover is it has this sort of matte, almost textured cover, and it's very different from some of the at the movie releases that I've had before, which have always had like high gloss covers. So this one, it feels very premium, very nice looking, and it's just, damn, it's a fine jacket to have. This also comes with a nice poster, which you don't see too often these days. I would have preferred some sort of booklet. These days I don't really put posters up on my wall, so I would prefer a nice little booklet where there would be some additional liner notes or any kind of stories or behind the scenes kind of information I think would be nice. But I do like having the posters. I'm going to keep it in the jacket just so 20, 30 years from now, that, maybe that could be a cool kind of collector's item, but hopefully I could keep that in good condition. It makes me think of some of like the old Star Wars LPs that did come with an old poster, and people still have some of those kicking around. The record comes in a nice glossy paper sleeve featuring some stills from the movie, which these look great, but I feel like there could be more iconic visuals from the movie that they could have chosen for this. So these are nice, but I feel like they could have done something a little bit better for this. As for criticisms, I don't know. The fact that it didn't come out earlier, I mean, this is pretty much a perfect piece. Like I said, at the movies, never disappoints for me. So far, I've had a perfect track record. Never disappoints with the pressings that I've gotten from them. So, I can't really say anything negative about this album. This is a perfect record. And if you're a James Bond fan, it's a must-own. You might ask, how many LPs does it come with?
2.
And hey, it comes with a poster.
Suppose that's something.
The ultimate question to always ask is this worth picking up?
Yes. Considerably.
What else can I say about Casino Royale? Normally I have much more planned to write. This one I just kind of did off the cuff. Oh, to finish my story, Mads Mikkelsen did in fact steal my backpack inadvertently. I was working at an event where he was, and as he left, he took what he thought was his Swiss gear bag. And I didn't think anything of it, but later he came back and saying, "This is not my bag." And I'm like, yeah, I think that's mine. And I'm glad he came back, because there was several $1,000s worth of camera equipment in that bag. So luckily for me, he did come back and he grabbed his own bag. So if you want to style yourself like Mads Mikkelsen, get yourself a black Swiss gear bag. But he was an absolute delight and pleasure to talk to, and I'm glad he did bring back my bag and got his own. I'm going to add a little bit of bonus here, talking about Quantum of Solace as well. So because that movie has not had a vinyl release yet, please release that one. I don't understand why they're so hesitant on the David Arnold scores. There's only a couple left, and I just don't know why they're not releasing them. But Quantum of Solace, that's a movie that gets a lot of criticism. To be honest, it's not my favorite, but I still think it's pretty good overall. I still enjoy it, even though it has its sort of flaws and quirks. But one thing that does not disappoint is, again, the score by David Arnold. It's absolutely phenomenal. There's great action scenes. And what I like is he is really building upon the material he did in Casino Royale. And he's kind of going somewhere with Daniel Craig's character, or arc, with his James Bond. And I really appreciate what he did there. I mean, Quantum of Solace has to be in one of my most listened to albums of the 2010s, I would think. So here's hoping they release that. It's a tremendous soundtrack.